Hello there, Sir from 17 once again. This is my Give Me God of War walkthrough, and we're going to be moving towards one of the hardest parts of the game. There are a handful of fights in this early moment where we do not have the abilities nor the skills that would make them much easier, so you're going to have to really earn some of them. And luckily enough, I've got some pretty good strategies, but the fundamental theme of this video is going to be strife, because these are some very difficult encounters. And hopefully you're up for the challenge, because they will be challenging until you start to understand how this game flows, how it works, and what exactly it is that you have to do to succeed. So there have been official difficulty changes lists posted online, and if you go to GameFAQs right now on their boards, they have it documented of the differences between the difficulties. So I'm going to read now from this article to give you an idea of the increases of what have happened for this difficulty from the base difficulty. So the first one says, almost all enemies will power up and turn elite after taking damage. Elite enemies are stronger and much more aggressive. Preventing them from becoming elite is vital to getting through this difficulty. So that's something we've already seen and we already understand. Enemies level up, they get healed, they get massive resistance to being launched, massive resistance to being flinched, they get access to unparryable or unblockable moves depending on the situation, or all kinds of bad things along those lines. They get increased damage and they get more aggressive. Enemies take slightly less damage than the previous difficulties, that's understandable. I think that's a bit of an understatement. Enemies deal a lot more status damage. Once again, you're going to see a lot of that with the poison and the burn. Harmful status effects last longer and are more potent. Enemies get a boost to their defense. No shit. Slight increases to damage dealt to enemies in mid-air.
They'll try and rob us?
Interesting. I wonder if you do more damage or less damage. Or is that to them? So they make it so that when you juggle them, you do more damage on this difficulty. That's cool. I didn't know that. Enemies can only be wall-pinned in the air. Okay. Interesting. Enemies can counterattack quickly after taking hit reactions or blocking an attack. There you go. That is something I've seen firsthand. In that very first video, when I kicked him into the wall and he immediately recovered and smacked me, that's what that is right there. Good to know, too. Kratos' motions during attacks is more accurate? What does that even mean? Weird. Are they trying to say that your attacks are looser on easier difficulties? Fewer advantages when the hero has a greater power level than an enemy. So even if you're higher level than them, you're still going to be having a struggle. Frost status effect reduces Kratos' invincibility frames on evades. I thought that was just what Frost did. I didn't realise that that was unique to this difficulty. Poison status effect reduces Kratos' power level. I didn't know that. Burn status effect does significantly more damage. Spartan rage gain rate is significantly reduced. Health pickups reduce status damage and can clear active status effects, and enemies are more resistant to status effects. Parry attacks are less effective. No shit. Elite enemies do not take ledge reactions and take significantly less reaction to Spartan rage. Ledge reactions, I don't really know what that means. I've got an idea, but that is essentially the gist of what we're doing here, guys. That is a lot of the struggles that you're going to be facing. And speaking of struggles, we're in the Wildwoods, so we're coming up against a leveled opponent right here. So you'll notice we managed to trip him up, and it put him on his ass. Very, very powerful. If we can kill them before they transform, we will have the biggest advantage. And to do that, we're going to be using the axe to freeze them, and we're going to be using a lot of the abilities to do as much damage as possible. This next spawn of enemies is particularly challenging because there is an enemy spamming projectiles at you, and at this moment in time I do not have the ability to chuck them back, so I'm going to sit all the way back here and I'm going to bait the enemies to come towards me so I can kill them before I get projectiles thrown at me. So parry into executioner's cleave will knock them away, keep them stunned, and we're just going to essentially chain this, and if you can freeze them and kick them, that will help, but be careful of that, because I did not think that that enemy had a line of sight on me just then, and I paid the price by taking almost, what is that, 60% damage off that one projectile. So be very careful, guys. Learn from my mistakes. I will not get hit again, but it happens, so you need to be aware of it. But parry, executioner's cleave, and try and stop them transforming if you can by throwing Leviathan. If you can stop it with either yourself or the boy, it'll make them die much quicker. A good idea here is to bait them all this way and then run and execute the guy who's throwing the garbage at you. I believe he only takes one executioner's cleave, but at the time I didn't think I'd be able to kill him so quickly because nothing died quickly on this game, in my experience. But I think at the end of this fight, when I run to kill the last guy, he dies from one executioner. So well worth your time baiting them this way and then getting rid of him. But even then, I think there will be another guy on the balcony, so you're never going to be free of people throwing shit at you unless you throw your axe at that guy. So, it's up to you guys, pick your poison. This is not difficult by any stretch of the imagination, as long as you can keep cool under pressure and your timing for the parries is good. And the parry timing is so relaxed, it should be good. But I think this guy only takes one hit. So boom. I think they changed that, I really do. I think that's one of the adjustments that the patch has done, because they've patched this game significantly since release. They patched it twice, and they say they tweaked the difficulty a little bit. I remember my first playthrough of this game on launch, and I remember having a hell of a harder time killing people who threw projectiles at me. So I think that's one of the balances, and if it is, I commend the team for that, because it's exactly as it should be. Anything that is designed to throw bullshit at the player should never, ever be tanky. It shouldn't exist like that. They're meant to be annoying, but incredibly easy to kill. Just like the the nightmares. Nightmares exist to make your life miserable, but they die so quickly you can never complain because you should get rid of them first. Same concept. It's good design, and this game didn't have that once upon a time, so I wish they'd give us details on exactly what they changed, because the change could be placebo and I could be completely misremembering, but on that first day, I remember having a miserable time with people who threw projectiles, so it's the kind of burn that you don't easily forget. Anyhow, the reason that I'm staying in this corner is because, as you can see by the red indicator around Kratos, there is an enemy on the balcony that's throwing garbage at me. So get rid of that guy, and then get rid of this guy up here. And you'll notice he's powered up too, he's leveled, but he's still going to take only a few axe throws, which once again, that is how it should be. They should never ever take a bunch of axe throws, and I'm almost certain that they did. So, if it is a change, it is a welcome one. But now that the battle is done, we can loot, we can venture around, pick up as many items as we can, and then we can get on with it and get to the next encounter. As I've mentioned in previous videos, I'm going to be trimming around this guide a lot. It's going to be a little bit disorientating for somebody who's never played the game, or for somebody who's looking for a walkthrough that will show them where to go, because this walkthrough is kind of being created with the tenet that you know what you're doing, and you only need help with the difficulty. Traversing itself is not the challenge of the game. There are plenty of waypoints. There's not too much in the form of punishment for wandering around and going off the path that's intended, so there's no real wrong way to go. I will be going to specific places, and I will be trying to call them by name, so that if you do have to reference and you don't quite know where I've gone, that you can do a quick Google search and you can get that done. I'm hoping you'll understand, because the game is pretty simple like that, and there's only certain things I'm going to be doing. But to kind of preface this video for when we get to the Lake of the Nine, I am going to be destroying the statue of Thor, because it's easy to do, it doesn't have anything too difficult standing in your way, and it's going to give you experience points. One of the main reasons that I'm going to be doing some of the optional stuff is to get abilities that are going to make life easier. In the future, I intend to beat this game without the abilities. I intend to do a very ridiculous run of it, and I don't know if it'll be possible, and I don't know if it'll be any fun, but I'm kind of learning in this, making this walkthrough, what works and what doesn't work, and it's teaching me just how capable you can be with simply the axe. It might not be the most interesting thing to watch, which is another thing as well. Something quite funny to know just there, you cannot open this unless you do that tutorial for the runic attack. It simply will not let you do that, which is quite strange. And this is the hardest fight in this level. Quite potentially one of the hardest fights in the game. And it's difficult because of one reason, and that is that there is a bunch of people throwing projectiles at you, and you're going to be fighting an insane amount of people here. This might be one of the biggest fights in the game, other than perhaps the two ogres with the archers throwing shit at you and the dudes running around the room with you. Like, there is easily 8 people in this room, maybe more, and each of them is capable of leveling up. And one of the easiest ways of dealing with it is to knock them off the abyss over there. Kind of kite them that way, then knock them down. But doing it can be a work of art when there are this many people attacking you. And at the beginning, if it was just this, and then on the next phase there were archers, and it was something else and perhaps a checkpoint, then you would never remember this fight. But because it's both, with no checkpoint, it becomes incredibly taxing when the dudes who throw shit turn up. And I would love if Kratos could get up onto the balcony with them, and get rid of them that way, but it seems like the game wants you to throw your axe. And there is nothing more difficult in this game than trying to throw your axe at people firing projectiles at you, while you have 8 fucking dudes, like, trying to bum you. It's awkward, is being kind to what it is. And my strategy here is very simple. I'm going to bait the attack to parry it, and then I'm going to use the time to do an executioner's cleave. You'll get a feeling of how long that move takes to do, so you will know whether or not you have enough time to let it loose, or to cancel it because you're about to be attacked, or to parry again, so that you can get a nice flinch again. Because the best thing about the parry in this game is it interrupts people, and it stuns them, and it gives you precious breathing moments to do attacks. Another thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be using the runic attack we've just got when it regens, just to deal as much damage as we can to all of them. And as I mentioned, if it was just this, I would like this fight because I've got a strategy that works. The problem is, when the archers turn up, everything goes to shit because the moment you make a mistake, they hit you, you flinch, and then someone else hits you and you die. So I'm going to be using the Rage of Spartans. And the really fantastic thing about the Rage is when you do the jump attack with it, the R2 attack, it will kill the archers on the balcony. And that's the reason I'm going to do it, to get rid of the archers. The side effect of using it, which is fantastic, is it's going to knock people in front of me, so it gives me the opportunity to knock them into the gap. So what you want to do is, when it gets a little bit too much, or when the archers spawn, you want to position yourself close to this back wall, where you have your back facing where they are, and your front facing the abyss. So when you do the jump attack, you knock as many people forward as you can, and you kill as many people behind you as you can. And that's the strategy we're going to do to get rid of the this particular spawn here. So a couple more dudes are going to turn up, and then you're going to get, I think there's 3 of them throwing shit. So at this moment, I didn't want to use the rage, because I just didn't want to. I come over here, I go for the executioner's cleave, and look at the damage it does. It does no fucking damage because he's purple, and he's a dude throwing projectiles. So that's a little bit disheartening, but it's not the end of the world. Keep calm, keep doing what we're doing, and hopefully you don't make a mistake like I do. But as soon as I make a mistake, I wanted to do this fight and get rid of it because I don't like it. This is actually a 1 attempt as well. This was a first attempt, believe it or not. You can kind of tell with my first attempts as well, because usually I end up taking damage in them. But at this moment, I'm just kind of straying around, seeing what I can do, hoping the boy does something, waiting for the regeneration, and then this happens. That was a bad move on my part. So this is the conundrum. Do I use the rage? Do I not use the rage? And then I'm thinking about it. I'm using it. So this kills the archers. And if you do it again, it will make sure that they all fly in the hole, and then the only dudes are left are people we can deal with. And then that is the end of the fight. Kill this guy, and then you will get a checkpoint, and then we'll be on a second fight, which is also really difficult as well. So the fight after this is kind of perplexing, because it's 2 of the heavier draugrs who have the big hits that you have to parry, because if you block them they'll guard break you. You can evade out of them, but they hit really hard, and because there's 2 of them, if you let them level up, it gets really messy, because you don't do any damage, and that's the real difficulty here. Dealing 0 damage to enemies that kill you very quickly, that you have to hit this much, just leads you to taking damage. If you do good damage, and they do good damage, you can get rid of them quite quickly, quite effectively, once you know what you're doing. If you never do good damage, and you always have to beat things up a lot, the longer you spend beating them up, the more opportunities they get to beat you up. And that's where the war of attrition, known as Give Me God of War, really starts to show its uglier side. It's difficult through attrition instead of design. And it's not a lot of fun at times, it must be said. It's a little disappointing to me. Like, the Executioner's Cleave does no damage to this enemy. The best thing to do to this guy would be potentially try to knock him off, but nothing seems to launch them. Like, the only way I think you can even begin... That's unfortunate too, because now he's going to transform and I can't stop it. So, immediately, you know, we're in for a treat. So, there's 2 of them, 1 is transformed. When you kill one of these enemies, more will spawn. So you want to try and work them both down as best as you can. And deal a ton of damage. You'll notice the axe throw to the face is really powerful against this enemy. But it's only powerful when he's level 1, or when he's not elite. When he becomes an elite, he doesn't give a shit anymore. And it becomes this, where they hit through everything. And you need to be really careful. Additionally, the Executioner's Cleave can fail you with its detection, and if it does, you can die. So be very careful with that. The pleasant side of it is, you can cancel a lot of the Executioner move. So you should be okay as long as you're paying attention. And as long as you're in that animation. But be careful coming out of it. Either dodge or hold the block. There are your 2 hopes. But I'm going to try and distribute damage evenly here. And the boy's going to help, hopefully. The boy can be really good here if you want to play defensively and run away and just throw the axe. Because the boy will get their attention, but you have to, of course, be pressing square to make them get pissed off at him. But there's the parries. Don't want to do too much damage because I want to make sure both of them are tired, both of them are injured. Because the next phase is, I believe, another one of the heavy guys with 2 normal draugrs. And it doesn't sound like a bad problem, but one mistake is all it takes for things to go south. And it escalates very quickly in this game. And a lot of people seem to think that that correlates in some way to strategy. But I don't really think that this game is any more strategic than a lot of the games I've played. I just feel like you have to hit things longer than most of the games I've played. Except for God Hand. But God Hand's a little different. So, 2 draugrs and another one of the heavier draugrs here. But luckily enough, we're about to kill this guy. So this shouldn't be too much of a problem. And as long as I keep on top of the standard guys and we stop them transforming, they should die quite quickly. And because I can freeze them, I should be freezing them and kicking them into each other, which is a really, really good strategy. Or kicking them off the edge if I can do, that's good too. But that move right there, that move has a bullshit forward hitbox. He will hit you when it doesn't touch you physically, because it has such a generous hitbox. So be very, very conscious that that's his fastest move, it has his most forward momentum, and it's the move that's going to catch you off guard the most. Because this enemy only has 3 moves. He has the horizontal yellow swing, he has the vertical yellow swing, and then he has that super fast one that can be blocked and parried. And that's it. 3 moves is not a lot. It's just in this game you spend a lot of the time focusing on other elements while you're fighting something, so you're always being conscious of people coming from behind and coming from the side. And these are skills that you might not have yet. However, if you've played other games that have this happening a lot more than this, in a considerably faster and more dangerous manner, such as God Hand, then you will not have too much of a problem here once you understand the animations. And you will improve, guys, you will get better. If you're struggling, if you're having a tough time, everybody's going to have a tough time at first, because the game is laboriously difficult, with incredibly inflated enemies, with preposterously stupid RPG statistics governing almost everything you do. But once you start to learn it, once you start to understand it, it is tedious, but you'll get through it. And apparently, a lot of people find it very satisfying, which can only mean, in my mind, that they don't play games on the hardest difficulties, because this might be one of the least satisfying difficulties I've ever played, and that's coming from somebody who you could probably name a challenge and I might have done it, because I've done a lot. And I know challenging difficulty, and I know the feeling of overcoming challenge, and it can feel fantastic, but in my mind, the challenge both has to be some semblance of fairness and another semblance of fun, and those are 2 things that don't always go hand in hand with difficult games. But those 2 fights just then, probably the hardest fights in the video, except for the one that's coming up again, which is my least favourite fight in the game. And it's only because it's one of those parts where there doesn't seem to be a very safe way of dealing with it, and it's really easy to get killed. And I don't really understand why they put such an assortment, but what can I say, this is a particularly difficult section. So coming up here is our first Revenant. Revenants on themselves are one of the easier enemies in the game, because you can perma-stun them with the spinning shield move that I purchased earlier on. They don't always like to get stuck in it, but every so often they surrender themselves to it and they just let you do it forever. I'm not entirely sure what it is. I thought originally it was because I was knocking them against the wall, so they can't get off the wall because I just keep perma-stunning them. But you can do this when they're not at the wall, and then there are times when they are at the wall and they'll get out of it. So I'm not entirely certain what it is that enables the Revenant to leave that loop, but she can, and you need to be aware of it. And the strategy is very simple, guys. You want to press square to make Atreus stun her, then you want to throw the axe to freeze her, and then you want to run up to her and start doing the charge R1 to stun her with the shield. And that's all you do. Charge R1, stun shield, fire an arrow. Charge R1, stun shield, fire an arrow. You don't even have to fire the arrows, but it's a good habit to get into because it's extra damage, even if it is minuscule. And that's how easy they can be. It looked simple, didn't it? They can be miserable, those enemy types, and there's a fight coming up where that's exactly what happens, because it puts one of those enemies with two of those heavy guys we've just fought, and they have a ton of life, she has a ton of life, and she's evasive, and she will continually fire projectiles that track you perfectly and curve around corners. So you spend the entire fight holding your shield up, and the entire thing's dreadful, miserable, and not very fun. But the funny part is, you can completely cheese it. Because if you trigger the fight and then run all the way back to this balcony, you can stare through that window that I just looked at that had the square prompt, and you can spam square, and your child will kill them with the bow, all the enemies, and the enemies will never aggro and never defend themselves and never turn elites, because he'll just keep shooting them perpetually, and they will gradually die. It takes about 10 minutes, but it will work. So if you have no qualms about getting through this difficulty and you just want the best strategies, then feel free to do that. You can do it a lot. It's super cheesy and incredibly effective. But instead, I want to show you a pretty awesome strategy using Rage of the Spartan. The Rage mode is something that I'm going to abstain from using because I feel like it's too strong and I shouldn't use it. And if I want to be a better player, I will learn to succeed without it. And I do believe that. I do think that that's something that will help you and help me. But there are moments where if I find that the fight is particularly distasteful or bullshit and I don't like it, that I have no qualms against using it. And this is one of those fights. It just so happens that the strategy I've got coming up is so elegant and beautiful that it's worth sharing. There's a fighting here too. A bunch of high-level purple projectile spammers, and without the parry to cast it back, this is one of those fights that even if you get close to them, they take so many hits that you end up getting hit by projectiles and things. So instead I'm just going to spam my axe and throw it at them, because it's, once again, it's a shining example of this difficulty being crappy, because these enemies should not take a lot of damage, they should die quickly, but they don't. They take tiny chunks, and it's really frustrating. So instead we're just gonna essence de cheese. But the other fight, it consists of a Revenant, two of the heavy Draugrs, and then more Draugrs turn up. There's also an ice guy at the very beginning, so it's kind of like a 3-tier fight. But the environment is kind of set up in such a way that the Revenant is able to cause chaos. And if you can kill her immediately by knocking her off, it'd be easy. But I haven't found a way to do it without using Rage. So the strategy I'm going to do is, if you run towards where she spawns, the moment she spawns, if you activate the Rage of the Spartan, the activation will knock her off and kill her for you, and then you can move to the side and use the jumping slam ability to knock the heavies into the abyss as well, and you'll knock all 3 of the difficult enemies off in one activation. And then you just have to face the next bunch of dudes, which shouldn't be too difficult because it's just one enemy, right? But he ends up beating me up because I'm shit like that. But before we can get to that, we have to endure this, which I would like nothing more than to run in this room, but these enemies don't melee you when you get close. They can still throw the projectile when you're in close proximity. It's so stupid. And it's strange because they do have a melee attack. It is it's unblockable, but you can parry it. It's a yellow ring attack. But look at what they do when you get close. They fuck off, and then they do one hit, and that's it. They fuck off, they do one hit, and most of the time, they try to throw the shit at you again. Really frustrating. You have to be in the middle of an attack to give them an incentive to swing at you. So hopefully I'm going to be sharing freezing tactics with these two guys. I should have turned to the left then and kicked him into the wall. It would have been more effective. Stop it, you morons. There you go. But look at him, backs up like 3 steps and then starts throwing it again. Oh no, he ran at me, interesting. It's nice to see that it's contradicting what I said, but believe me guys, the amount of times they've tried throwing that projectile from 2 yards is kind of hilarious. They take so much damage. But keep on parrying, keep on throwing the axe, keep on shooting with the kid. I'd love to tell you that it gets better as far as your damage, but it really doesn't. You're still going to hit them for far longer than you ever thought was possible, but you're going to get really, really good at doing it. And that's one of the benefits of a game that's designed like this. I personally think it's one of the weakest and shallowest ways to design difficulty, but it's undeniable that if you spend a long time beating something up and many occurrences of doing that, you get really good at doing that. You understand it on a really high level, and that's going to be very useful for doing the optional stuff like Nilfheim and Muspelheim and the Valkyries and what have you, because it's going to teach you just exactly the best ways to damage enemies that have an incredible amount of resistance. I put a video up of the final boss, the final part of the final boss the other day, and in that fight I figured out a really interesting combination of beatdowns on the boss that I probably wouldn't have been able to do if he'd have died in a reasonable amount of time. So there are benefits to even the most miserable of circumstances, and it's going to make you a much better player, and hopefully you enjoy the difficulty and you enjoy how it's designed, because if you do, there's plenty more of it. However, we have a date with my least favourite fight in the game, because there doesn't seem to be an advantageous position in this, and I really dislike the fact that they throw 2 new enemies together at the same time. Very, very challenging. There are fights later on that are way harder than this that I would gladly play instead, but for some reason this is one of my kryptonites, this particular one. And it's one of those that I've fought it a bunch, I understand what I want to do, but doing it's always difficult. So instead I use Rage of the Spartans to alleviate it. But run over towards the handle and then activate the Rage. Freeze her, Rage, and there she goes. You don't even have to do the stomp. The stomp there was pointless, she was already off the edge. There goes that guy, there's one more behind me. Knock him backwards, he's dead as well, and the other guy's dead. Look at that. How clean was that? Absolutely beautiful, right? I love that kind of design. It just fell into my lap in such an elegant manner, and now the big guy's going to drop down just here, and I'm going to make an absolute fool of myself by somehow failing to fight one of these when I just fought 3 at the same time. So yeah, just goes to show, guys, I'm still learning, I'm still human. And in a normal, like if this was a challenge run, when this guy inevitably damages me, I would have to restart, and the restart's before you kill the blue dude, which is fun. But there's him trying to level up, there's the really fast move, and there's my mistake, which cost me, and I got really mad at that. And it's the 3rd time that's happened too. And I don't know why. For some reason, I don't want to blame my controller, I don't want to blame the game, I don't know what to blame, it has to be me, right? But there's been 3 instances now where I've gone to block, I have not pressed the button twice, and I have got a guard break. And I don't know why. I couldn't honestly tell you. It's one of those weird things. It's really strange because you don't accidentally tap a button twice. You just don't. If you did, it'd happen more often, right? It's just one of those weird things. For some reason just then, he guard broke instead of guarding, and I took a hit because of it. And it'd be really nice if the guard break acted as kind of a deflect, and it'd stop the hit, and it'd be another way of parrying, but it isn't. So I took a nice hit of shame just then, which really, really irked me. I can't even begin to tell you how upset I was at that instance just then. But I was. And now we can move on to some puzzle solving, and we can move forward. There is a fight coming up, I believe it's on the next video, where we face my favourite enemies in the game. Humans. The only instance of this in the entire game, which is really, really shameful. I think this is the most disappointing act of this God of War, is that we don't get to rip apart poor civilians and get green orbs from them. But these enemies coming up are the most squishy enemy in the game. They die faster than the nightmares do. It's absolutely beautiful. You throw your axe at them, it's like you threw an axe at a human. It feels fantastically good for the power fantasy. And apparently it's in the video. So look at this. You see how much damage I did just then with 1R1? Look at that. Can you imagine if this was the damage that the enemies took? Ah, I'd love this game. Like, I would prefer if the enemy's life was like this, but everything they did killed you instantly. Everything. Doesn't matter what it is. Even if, like, you trip up, you died instantly. That's my kind of difficulty. You kill fast, you die fast. That's my kind of design. But unfortunately, this is a gimmick. This, by the way, this is how much damage a projectile enemy should take. Watch this. This is exactly what every projectile enemy should do. Instant fucking death. Instant death. Do you see that? That's like Darkside Phil. Goodbye. Nothing he could do. Wasn't even blocking. Look at that. Look how beautiful this is. Love it. But the gimmick is, they then turn into these fellas, but you see these fellas again, and you never see humans again. So it's really strange. And then this fight, as you know, Mr. Spiky Hair, cool guy there, is immune to the axe. He's resilient to it, but he's not completely invulnerable. Certain things will hurt him, but his other two friends are very susceptible to the axe throws for some reason. And the clip before this was me using the fists to keep them all stun-locked against the wall and kicking them, but I kicked them so much, and it does so little damage, that throwing the axe was faster. So this is the one that made it into the walkthrough. Because I've been trying to work out strategies that aren't necessarily top-tier, ridiculously high skill level. Because there's no point in me showing you how to do the most difficult thing to time and the most complex combos and stuff, because what if you can't do them? And I'm not trying to insult you, because admittedly the execution in this game is really easy, but at the same time, I don't want to make strategies that ostracize people who don't have the same ability as me. So this, for instance, is a great strategy. It's called the mash the R2, and he cannot move because this game is well designed. And this is why I didn't show the other clip, because this is how much damage they take when you do the heavy attack. Heavy attack on this motherfucker against the wall, and it's doing chip damage. Does anybody else think that this is bad design? In what world do you hit somebody with 30 heavy attacks and do so little damage? That's why Give Me God of War's garbage. It's just not well designed. But it's hilarious that I could do that to him, because that's not how that should be either. They should have a move that makes them recover off the wall if you're blatantly exploiting them like that. And guess what? A game in 2006 that revolutionised this camera style and this combat style mastered this years ago. And that game's called God Hand.